Hello, everyone. This is Stacy Harding and Al Colleen coming to you with another edition of Fourth Level Conversations. And we're excited to be with you. Al, it's awesome to be with you and to see you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Stace. It's always great to be with you and with the folks. And, these are important conversations because they aren't just another podcast of some interesting person that's out changing the world in that way. You and I are putting information together from our own experience that we hope and believe has universal applicability to people. And I'm excited about our conversation today because it's emblematic of something I've been going through for a long time and just recently, and something you've been going through recently and also for a long time. And it comes up out of a group coaching conversation I had yesterday with this group I talk to every week. And it was really an idea around when do we take the risk of leaving the safe, secure, and the known in favor of the possible? And where it came from, besides my experiences, was I had a trainer 23 years ago that asked a question in a workshop that I'm still thinking about today because I think it was such a profound question. And what he asked was, would you be willing to risk everything you have to possibly become everything you could be? And I thought, I'm not sure I would, and yet I'd be afraid not to. And that's wrestled around in me now for 23 years. And then I looked up last month and realized that I've been at this business, integrated mastery programs, for 25 years. And there's 25,000 calls in there, and there's 12 retreats, and da da da, all the stuff that has happened. And it even brought you and I back together, and really together for the first time, even though we kind of knew each other across the room, into an authentic place of connection. And so I was thinking about, well, 25 years of IMP, what does that matter? And then recently I'm trying to put together a retreat in honor of those 25 years. And, I've done a lot of retreats, I don't know, 12, 15 of them, whoever it's been. And it's always stressful putting them together because of the risk. And I realized I don't really need to do it. I don't need to do it economically. I don't need to take the risk of losing money, of disappointment, of finding out nobody likes me enough to want to come to a retreat, whatever it is. But whenever I've decided to do that in my life, it's always been scary. It's always had a host of tapes in my head of all the things that can go wrong and the risk side of it. And yet, when I've chosen to boldly pursue a dream, a vision, something that I want to do, I find that that fear is actually a positive catalyst that has me operate at a higher level of conscientiousness because it may fail, but I don't want it to fail because I didn't do every damn thing I could do to have it succeed, God willing, right? And so when I put these together, I've researched all over Tennessee for great venues. And the first place I went through sent me a proposal for $80,000 for a weekend, and that's beyond the budget. But looking around, I found a perfect place last week that's just literally perfect. So I've started putting it out, and of course, people are busy, and it's all that. So I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it got me thinking. Whatever happens with it, our life is basically a choice of being in this room, and maybe we've talked about the room before, but being in this room of familiarity, of comfort, of security, and we've lived our whole life there, and we've got it set up just like we like it, and it's very comfortable. And there's a door, and now and then we push on the door, and it never opens. But one day we pull the door, and it opens, and we're standing on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Serengeti plain of possibility, of things that could happen. And it's awesome, but it's scary because to realize to leave the room means I leave what's warm, safe, and dry in favor of the possibility. And the possibility is growth, is inspiration, is fulfillment, is enlightenment, is really understanding at a level you wouldn't understand staying in the room. So I don't know what's going to happen with the retreat, but I'm going to boldly do it and then let God decide, just as I've boldly tried to do IMB, just as you've boldly decided to open your chiropractic clinics as well as be an IMP trainer. And so I thought it might be an interesting topic for us to process of this dynamic of the fact that growth comes through taking the risk of the possible toward a vision and a dream, and that it isn't easy and it isn't guaranteed. And yet, in many ways, it's what it is to be really fully alive and not just not dead. What are your thoughts, brother?
Well, first of all, I'm sure everyone watching would echo my thoughts. Congratulations on 25 years and 25,000 hours and all the retreats. But the more important number is the number of lives that you've impacted, Al, including my own. And I know that you'll give all the glory to to God and the universe and all those things. And you're just a beacon of a message that the world needs to hear. But I also want to tell you that you are beloved by so many and by
Mm,
myself as well. So thank you, first of all, for being willing to take
very
that risk
kind, brother.
years ago. And I am so excited about this subject because I was thinking about um, what safe, warm, and dry leads to. And, oftentimes, Al, when we think about these things, excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of allergy stuff here, but when we think of this, we typically think of our own journeys, right? And what has it meant for us? And I was very safe, warm, and dry for most of my professional life. And as you know, I stepped out and took some chances in coming to work with IMP and then also in this chiropractic endeavor with my partner, Kevin Croker. Um, I've never felt more alive and free, and I'm scared to death. I'm scared to death. I've never felt more alive and free. And I thought about what inspired people to become pioneers in the early years of this nation. And they were just all entrepreneurs.
Mm,
They really were. And talk about risk. There's a lot more at risk than a financial success or failure, right? There's the risk of death. And yet, um, the bounty at the end of that journey for those who successfully got through it was freedom and peace and joy and happiness. And it didn't mean there wasn't hardship and hard work. By the way, we don't get anywhere without hard work in this world. That's true in personal relationships. It's true in business and so forth. And so I think about the risk that I've embarked on in the last couple of years, and the risk that you took 25 years ago, the risk you're going to take with this retreat. And I look at it and think, it's not really that. It's the ability to embark upon the God given talents that you were given and to use them for the glory of other people and of God and the universe and all those things. And as a result of that, there's this overwhelming feeling of confidence that it's going to turn out as it's supposed to. And so we can accept that. And we've often talked in our podcast about expectations, what they lead to, particularly in relationships. It usually doesn't lead to happiness, it leads to stress and anxiety. But if we can surrender to measuring the outcomes and just focus on the journey, we can't help but be successful in the eyes of our own efforts and the eyes of God and others. And I assure you that this world would be very different had you not taken that risk all those years ago. And what I think about with your retreat is, what will this world, me included, since you've graciously invited me to participate, what would the world be missing if you don't do this retreat? What will those who decide to go and the multiplication of that experience to their others, what would the world be missing? And so you can't afford not to do it. There's my encouragement for you. You can't not do it, brother.
Well, there was an ad years ago on TV by an outfit called AIG that I think is an insurance company.
I think so.
And it was a really clever ad. It simply said, the greatest risk in life is not taking one. And so I think what we're really talking about here, and we all think we know what risk means, what it is, but how would you define risk, Stacy?
Well, gosh, didn't know you were going to ask me that, but I would think my first reaction is risk is embarking upon something that you are not assured of the outcome, that there is the possibility of loss that you would experience. There is the risk of embarrassment, shame that you tried something and failed. Risk is certainly being uncomfortable. And so risk is, I suppose there's what I'd almost like to define differently. What's risk and what's insanity? Because there is a point beyond taking risks that's just insane. If I said, "Hey, I'm going to train to be an Olympic sprinter," come on, that's insanity. Okay. If I were going to take the risk to say I could actually run a marathon still at this age, that's a risk. I might fail. I might lose something. Obviously, those are different. And so I look at risk as a calculated um, pursuit of a passion that you find worthy and important, realizing that you could totally fall on your face and you could experience loss of reputation, revenue, all those other things. But if you look at it differently and think, even if that happens, look how I will grow. I don't know if I
Yeah,
defined
no, I think that's a
yours.
really compelling definition and a very high level definition. As you were speaking, I'm thinking what comes to me is that there are three relationships with risk. One, that there is actual risk, there is perceived risk, and there is the illusion of risk. And how I differentiate those is based on your definition of risk, of the fact that you're not always comfortable. You may lose something, all that. As you're thinking, I'm thinking that's life. I mean,
Yeah,
being alive is a risky thing and you're going to lose it physically. It's, ahead of time. Well, I don't know if ahead of time, but along the way you realize, oh, this is a finite trip, as Stacy Harding and Al Colleen and every other person who watches this in the world. So life itself is risky, and so that's the actuality. Um, Perceived risk is what we do in our minds to want to. Really be afraid of the unfamiliar and where we don't have the illusion of control. And that's where risk is, I think the opportunity for growth is, because you end up you end up noticing where your biases and your fears and your insecurities are. And, if I'm worried about losing 20 grand by putting down a deposit on a retreat place and then nobody comes, well, I'll be embarrassed and I'll lose 20 grand. But neither one are really life threatening or even life changing, actually. They're inconvenient, but it's not like a serious risk. It's not going to war. It's not charging Omaha Beach. It's not a mother with 5 kids that are of all ages that has to go out and find 3 jobs just to be able to feed them. There's risk and then there's risk. And so I think risk is a term that we too often just assume is when we're uncomfortable, but life itself is about growth, and growth involves risk. Growth can be positive or negative. Growth can be cancer. Growth can be an awakening to enlightenment and to your eternal self beyond this physical being. It's got a whole spectrum of things. So my original premise in bringing this up with the group I was talking to was, if we marry this to a lot of the key concepts in IMP, which is actually creating a risk, so to speak, by creating a vision of something that is out in future that we're going to make up, that we're going to just create out of whole cloth in our minds as something that is inspirational. Wayne Dyer used to say, when you're inspired, you're in spirit. So I tend to think of inspiration as a state that God allows us to come into when we're on track for something that matters. It doesn't guarantee outcome. But when we decide to pursue that vision, like you have with the chiropractic clinics, like you have with joining IMP, like I had in starting IMP, what you're really doing is you're pursuing something that you feel is noble, honorable, inspirational, and beneficial for you and for other people, that may fail and may have you be embarrassed or lose money or whatever. But it's the Marine diving on the grenade that knows he's now got 2 seconds left to live, but he's taking the risk of doing that out of a higher ideal. So in many ways, we begin to glimpse and taste that part of us that is the creative energy of God when we take risk. And oftentimes, I think we get endorsement from God, source, universe, that actually opens doors and provides new pathways along the way that we didn't know were going to be there. And our courage, our boldness to pursue the possible at the expense of the known and the comfortable is often the dues we have to pay to discover not only who we could be, but who other people are, that ultimately is part of the process of merging into the oneness of Christ consciousness, of enlightenment. So I could argue that while I'm risk averse by nature, most of my life has been spent in risk. I've been self-employed for 3/5 of my career, and it's really what's created the greatest fulfillment in my life. And it's been a great delight and a surprise that it is truly the greatest risk, not taking one. And my nature was to not lose. But one last comment, like an airplane with no automatic pilot, you're either rising or falling in altitude. You're either growing or dying. And I hope part of what people take away from this podcast today is your tomorrows are limited. Don't waste them by mere comfort, but instead pursue the possible to see who it is that you could be as not only your own fulfillment, but in making an impact on the world, so you create a ripple in the wave of the future of the world, even though you will be leaving the ocean of that world at this dimension in favor of the universal dimension. Do it anyway, and do it with nobility of purpose and inspired vision. Give it your all. Let God decide what the results are going to be, because to me, that's a formula for fulfillment that is antithetical to warm, safe, and dry. What do you think?
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I hang with this guy. That whole section of the 3 different types of risk, you just changed my whole philosophy about my own adversity towards risk. Mine's perceived. Mine has been perceived. It's not really been the reality that I had experienced to this point. And I was thinking about the last part of what you just said about not focusing on or allowing God or the universe to determine the outcomes. There's such peace in that. If we can let go of trying to manufacture the results, and I'm thinking about that in everything from your business life to your marriage to your important relationships. If we could just let go of that and focus on the journey and enjoy the journey and be present at the moment. If I don't have a desire to run a marathon, but if I were, I probably wouldn't go out there today and try to run 15 miles. I might go run for 5 blocks because I'm not a runner anymore. But just focus on the present journey that you're on, and then just let go of the expectation of the results. That's not saying don't have goals and don't measure your key performance indicators and all those things in the areas of your life and in your business. Of course you do that. That's smart and it's responsible. But could we just let go of the immense weight that we put on our shoulders for trying to manufacture outcomes? And I'm thinking about your retreat, and I know you'll do this. Just do the work. And it won't be a failure because of all of the impact that you've had over all of these years. People are going to come. People's lives are going to be changed. The economics are going to work out just fine. And even if they don't, but one person comes, 2 people come, and they have a life-changing experience where they go back and they multiply that impact, it will have been worth it. And I'm a believer, too, that all the good things we have in life have come from God anyway. Maybe even our resources and our money, right? We've been put in situations to earn it. And so we don't really need to worry about those things, in my opinion. Yes, there are people who are homeless. Yes, there are people around the world who won't have 3 meals today. But in this great country we live in, that's typically not the case for someone who doesn't have a mental incapacity or other things that have caused them to be in that situation. And so we don't really, when we're taking risks, need to worry whether we're going to have clothes on our back today or whether we're going to eat or whether we'll have shelter. So take more risk. We've all heard of this story. I don't know who did the study. I always think it was Harvard, but I don't know if it was or not, about interviewing, people in their mid to late 80s and having them look back at their lives and saying, if you have any regrets, what would they be and what would you have done different? And the overwhelming top issue was taking more risk. And so we're still at a stage where we can do that. And the one final thing I'll say before I let you go on, Al, you talked about this growth or regression. And I've thought about that. I've taught people this concept of life planning and personal life vision and so forth. And the minute that you stop trying to grow, that's when you're in trouble, honestly. And so I look at you, I look at me, we're in probably the latter stages of our time on this earth, and we're still trying to grow. And I know you are today. You're trying to grow today. So am I. And so I encourage everyone, don't be thinking that you've learned everything because you've been through college, you've been through your training for your career, and you've now done it for all these years. No, don't be stagnant. Become a reader. Hal, you're the most committed reader I've ever met, and I thought I was a pretty good one. Read, read, and you will learn more about yourself and more about your role in this world and how you can impact it. So I love what you're doing. I love what
Well, you've said a lot of kind things about me this morning and previously, and now I'm going to say some things that are going to embarrass you, and you're going to deflect, and you're going the things that a good humble
I
person
would just
does.
deflect right now. It's all deflected.
I think as you're speaking, Stacy, risk is really faith in action.
Yeah.
And so, what is faith? Faith is the courageous vestation of belief in something that isn't guaranteed. It's a courageous act of trust. And when we trust even a small thing, by implication, we're trusting this existential experience we have of being temporary entities in a physical body, in the faith that we are more than that, and that consciousness is what we really are, and it's still here when the body isn't. And that brings me back to you. One of the great blessings of the last few years is how emblematic you are of what I've discovered about human beings as a whole. Only because I kind of sort of knew your story across the room. You were this industry icon for 30 years. You were a major leader in a major mortgage company that I saw start from nothing and become a nationwide thing. You played the game at a very high level, very successfully for decades on time. And you built a big life and wealth and all the rest of it. And then you went through a lot of transitions and a lot of changes. And I think those tests, when they come, are ways for us to kind of, it's God's way, the source's way of saying, okay, so just so you don't get too comfortable in thinking that this life that you have co created with me, with God, is really somehow says something about you. I'm going to take that away and see who you are and who you think you are. And what you did that is so inspirational and so important for people to know is that you could have climbed into a bottle and stayed there. You could have basically just spent the money and ended up on the streets. You could have gone on one last trip around the world and blown your brains out. All sorts of dark choices were available to you. What you did, Stacy Harding, was you decided to call me up and spend a lot of money because IMP isn't cheap. It's more than worth it, but it's not cheap. A lot of money that you didn't really have to spend. You did in net worth, but not your preference. And you did that. And most importantly was you didn't just go through our 2 days together and kind of do coaching. You took it to heart and you made it your own, and you basically said, this is truth, and it's truth that I've always kind of known in there, but there's language and structure around it as to that helps me know how to work with it. And then you boldly decided to take that forward into be starting Hourglass Consulting, and then join IMP as a trainer, and then start this chiropractic thing, putting more money out. And it's not like there's a guarantee on any of that, but you're such a wonderful example of faith in action. You're such a, and I think the reason you're feeling more fulfilled, at least I certainly hope you are, is that while there's less certainty about what tomorrow holds, you've taken some major steps forward in knowing the real being that you are beyond your Stacy Hardingness, beyond the image of that, beyond the accomplishments of that, which were substantial. So, in many ways, you're an exemplification of what every human has the opportunity to do, but not everybody has the boldness to do. There are people that are born in a small town in Oklahoma and never leave that town and grow up and marry the high school girlfriend and then get divorced 10 years later and go work at the factory until the factory closes and they go on welfare and drink themselves away and they're dead at 55. I had a brother that was sort of one of those. No judgment in that, but I think for people that have the courage that you've had to say, God is going to take away my illusion of comfort until I decide to get in the game and take the risk of pursuing a dream. And what you're doing is pursuing multiple dreams, IMP, the chiropractic thing, all of it. But you've revealed much more of who you are, and you've helped me see who you really are beyond your Stacy Hardingness, beyond the good-looking dude across the room. What I got to see was you started out early in life thinking you might be a minister. I think you are a minister. And I think your ministry is just a bigger church than a brick building with protocols. I think your ministry is your life. I think your ministry is an exemplification of what we're all here given the opportunity to do, but a lot of people, either because they're starving in the streets of Biafra or something, they don't have the time to be pursuing that. They're just busy trying to survive. You and I have been given a life where we've got enough comfort and certainty that we have no excuses. And we can hang out in that comfort zone and waste our life, or we can take the chance of what life could be to discover what's beyond this level of reality to a greater reality. And I tell you in all truth, Stacy, you are one of the best examples of a truly authentically spiritual human being I've ever met, because you have gone out on the skinny branches where the growth is, and you've decided to take a chance at a time when it was perceptually not safe, and maybe in fact not safe in the sense that it may change your lifestyle for the better, worse, or the same. But whatever happens with that outcome, you've already won, because you've courageously demonstrated that the only real thing for us to live for is to understand what this dimension is and why it ends in the way we perceive it. And that's found through a spiritual conviction. And you're a living exemplification of that by the choices you've made the last several years. And I'm deeply honored that I've gotten to see who you really were, because by proxy, you are everyone. Everyone here is. I'll finish with this. I don't know if I talked about this in a previous podcast, but an image come to me maybe a month ago. You have an ocean, and the ocean evaporates into clouds. The clouds condense into raindrops, and as a drop falls out of that cloud, that's an individual human life, metaphorically. And it feels alone because it's water going through air, and it feels separate, isolated. And its life is going to be as long as the fall from the cloud to the ocean. And if the clouds are high, you have a longer life. If the clouds are low, you have a shorter life. And in that fall, you're going to think that you're alone. You're going to think that you're a separate something. You forget you're the ocean, you're the water, and you're going to rejoin that water. People with faith, the kind of wonderful demonstration of soul that you give the world, are people that know while they're the drop falling through the air, they are still the ocean. And so, in effect, while there's a perception of risk, there is no risk, because the ocean is eternal.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I will tell you that the theme of just about everything we've talked about, it boils down to this word faith. And, I don't know if people stop and really think what that means. And what do they have faith in? Some people have faith in nothing. They've lost trust. And so they don't have faith. And then they lose faith in themselves even. And Al, I went through some hardship. It's nothing compared to what a lot of human beings go through. It was real for me. Of course, you've been through plenty yourself. And faith is what leads you out. And I have a deep faith in God. I have a deep faith in the good of humanity in general. I know there's plenty of evil out there, but I generally think people are good and their souls are good and their hearts are good. They get distorted sometimes over the course of a life. But then there's also this faith in ourselves and the fact that we are of great value. When you think about, I believe in a creator, if you think about all the universes and all the things we see, and then there's this human existence that somehow the creator wanted to have relationship with and have others in relationship with other, that means we're very, very valuable, and that you as a person are extremely valued. That's not meant to feed our ego or level three. It's not meant that at all. But as you just described in your description of the ocean and the raindrop and the clouds, we're all part of that. And so faith to me, and I think about how is that defined, and there is a biblical scripture that says that faith is having belief and hope in what you cannot see. And for me, that's the only way I can actually, if I'm being honest, it's the only way I'm going to get through this day, Al. I'm being honest. There are fears that can overcome me. There are doubts. There are things that happen in our business and our life that we have zero control over. And if I don't have faith that it's all going to work out as it's supposed to, and it will be perfect because I'll grow, other people will grow, God will be honored, whatever, then I can get through the day. But I'm telling you, for me, if I don't have faith, I can't even get through the day.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for you describing that, and we're hopeful that people will grasp onto that. And when you have the ability to grab faith, risk isn't really that scary. You can get doubts in the middle of it, but risk isn't that scary. And you're not going to be, you will follow through on the retreat. I know you will.
Well, as you're speaking, I'm thinking once again that there are three types of faith. There is a lack of faith, and a lack of faith in people's life tends to put them into a dark state that I think even in itself is part of the perfection of it all. I'm a reincarnationalist. You're not. Okay, doesn't matter. I think the cloud keeps circulating the water. You think no, it's a one-time. Okay, I don't care. What matters is however that turns out to be, whichever is true, or maybe both are true. I don't know. I think there's no faith where people have given up the courage to trust the unseen in biblical definition. And that was my brother dying in the streets of Boulder at 55 from an alcohol addiction that had him lose everything. When you have no faith, and not just faith in God, faith in yourself, faith in life, faith in the future, that ability to trust the unseen, the unknown, the not guaranteed, well, you're in a stagnant downward spiral of darkness. And that's where a lot of people go because they have an excessive reliance that it somehow ought to happen to them. That's one type of faith, is a lack of it. Second type of faith is reactive faith. It's when we don't have a choice but to have faith because where we are, we're on the iceberg and it's melting, so we've got to jump in the ocean and swim. And a lot of people practice that kind of faith. They forget about faith in themselves and other people in God until they're put into a pressure cooker where they don't have a choice but to try faith because they got nothing else to lose. That I would think of as almost conditional faith because you don't have a lot to lose. Proactive faith is the third kind of faith that is a choice to actually open that door to the room, see the Serengeti plain, and jump off the damn cliff because you can fly. You can fly anywhere and do anything. You may splat, and it may be the coyote in in the cartoons, but that's above your pay grade. Proactive faith is where the real opportunity becomes to begin to experience what God is and what we are, at least in my way of thinking, which is pure consciousness. I think we are all part of the consciousness of the source. And it's a macro consciousness that encompasses more than our human brains can possibly imagine. And to trust that whole system, regardless of what impact it has on this life, I choose to believe that when I practice that, and I'm not a guy that naturally practices that. I don't want to go and skydive. I don't want to go and do those things. But in the moments of my life when to be fair, I often had reactive faith because I had no other choice. But when I've had the courage to take a chance on it all and practice proactive faith, Stacy, I've never had it disappoint me. It didn't always turn out the way I wanted it to, and was often quite different. But what happened was it's jumping off the cliff and realizing that there's a ledge that's only 3 feet down and you don't even get hurt. And now there's a stairway down to the Serengeti where you can do anything. And there may be a hang glider or an ultra glide where you can kind of fly over it and see where you want to be. It's miraculous. we discover miracles through proactive faith. We discover the interactive nature of God, whatever you think God is, through proactive faith. Proactive faith is the courage of recognizing you are more than your name, your body, your accomplishments, your gender, your race, any of that. You are the same as me, the same as Stacy, the same as everyone. You are a temporarily, seemingly separate aspect of consciousness that's part of the whole. And enlightenment, Christ consciousness, is really nothing more than the recognition that you aren't going anywhere ultimately. Your body will, your personality will, but this place we're talking about that's accessed through proactive faith is the place where you join the ocean and you realize, Stacy, at some level, you and I are in the same place. At some level, everybody watching this is in the same place we are. They may not understand the words, they may, doesn't really matter. That's limited by the filtration of our cognitive ability. What we're talking about here is the heart connection to the universality of all beings in the ocean of consciousness. And that is accessed, in my experience, through proactive faith. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a good place to finish, and I would just encourage people to pursue and find their own proactive faith. And just in light of our earlier discussion, Al, thank you for pursuing your proactive faith and starting IMP 25 years ago. You had to do that. And it's been nothing, I'm sure you feel like it's a blessing beyond belief. And certainly those who have been impacted by that, including myself, feel that way. So I hope this has brought great value to people. It has me, again, like it does every time. I appreciate our time together. And I'll let you have the final word. And we thank everybody for watching.
I was originally going to give up on life when I got fired from the company that I sold and got fired from. And I went home and told my wife to divorce me, and she's going to take it all because I'm a loser and I'll just fade into the woodwork. And her love and her courage had me look at that differently, to choose to find the thing that I came here for. I think everyone's life is a gift from God, and what you do with your gift back, and your job here is to discover what is your unique gift and what's the price to understand what it is and pursue it, and what's the cost if you don't. IMP is why I was born. And everything up till then, I was 50 when I started, 48. So 2/3 of my life was spent preparing to discover why I came here in the first place. And I came here not to be famous. I came here not to really have anyone even remember my name 30 days after I die. But if, having discovered my gift and having pursued developing IMP and sharing it with a lot of people through the years, including you, Stace, if somehow that helps you, Stacy, or other people discover who you are, then that again is part of the divine hand and the perfection of it all. I think by finding our gift and pursuing it, we end up seeing the larger reality behind this limited reality. And we do that by practicing proactive faith, which is really full circle where we started this conversation. It's taking the risk of the possible at the expense of the known. And in doing that, you will surprise yourself. You will be that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where he throws the sand out over the valley and the path appears. That's really what it is. So I really hope people hear today and listen to this podcast a few times and ask yourself, what is my unique gift that I'm here to pursue? Have I found it? If not, what risk do I need to take as proactive faith in action to find that thing once and for all, so I can spend whatever physical time I have left here giving it away to other people, and in doing so, discovering that I'm not really separate from anyone else. I'm at one with everyone when I'm not busy limiting myself by that small room that we started with. Thank you as always, Brother Stacy.
This is amazing. We hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.